Canada and New Zealand just went through one of the biggest housing crashes in modern history. And now, new data suggests Australia could be only 2 months away from joining them. So is this it? Is the property crash everyone has been waiting for finally here? Hey guys, it's Scott here. On the surface, this actually makes a lot of sense. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand all went through almost the exact same property cycle. Prices exploded after the borders reopened in 2021. Affordability collapsed. And now 2 of those 3 markets have already rolled over. Canada's housing market flipped completely and crashed. New Zealand followed close behind, sliding into one of its longest downturns ever. There are people over there who paid $1 million for a home just a few years ago and are now sitting on properties worth less than what they owe. But Australia has kept climbing since 2020. So why is Australia the outlier? And before you jump in and say it's simply because we didn't cut migration like Canada and New Zealand did, stop right there. I promise you it's not that simple. My team and I spent hours digging through government data and economic research to find the real reasons, and migration is only one small piece of it. Stick with me for the next 5 minutes, and I'll walk you through everything nobody else is talking about. Let's start with the obvious one, because I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. Migration surged across all 3 countries after the borders reopened, and none of them built enough homes to keep up. Prices took off, rents exploded, vacancy rates collapsed. Then Canada and New Zealand slammed the brakes on migration, while people started leaving New Zealand in record numbers. Australia kept migration high. So yes, migration explains part of the story, but it's nowhere near the whole picture. Think of a country like a tall building and housing like one of its top floors. When an economic shock hits, the top floors only survive if the foundation underneath is solid. That foundation is the real economy, jobs, incomes, debt levels. Let's look at jobs first. Australia's unemployment rate sits around 4.4%, compared with about 5.3% in New Zealand and 6.5% in Canada. Lower unemployment means more people can safely service a mortgage, which means banks can lend with confidence instead of fear. Now here's the part most people get backwards. Australia has one of the highest interest rates in the developed world at 4.35%, while Canada has already cut down to 2.25% and New Zealand sits around 2.5%. Everyone assumes low rates are a good sign. They're not. Central banks cut rates when the economy is struggling and needs life support. Canada and New Zealand are cutting because their economies are weak. Australia is holding a high rate because our economy can actually handle it, and demand for housing has stayed strong anyway. Now let's talk about household stress, because this is really what determines whether a market crashes. It's not interest rates on their own. It's whether people are being forced to sell. Australia's mortgage arrears are low and falling, even with rates this high. The Reserve Bank says arrears have dropped back to pre-pandemic levels, partly because households built up big buffers in offset and redraw accounts. Compare that to Canada, where arrears keep getting worse and forced sales through power of sale listings have surged. New Zealand's mortgagee sales have hit their highest levels on record. Why the difference? Because Australian banks stress test every loan against a serviceability buffer of about 3% above the actual rate. Canada only tests around 2%. New Zealand doesn't even have a mandatory buffer at all. So Australians are simply less likely to be approved for loans they can't actually afford. Then there's culture and policy. Property in Australia isn't just a place to live, it's the national retirement plan. Our biggest companies are banks, and banks are essentially mortgage machines. If housing crashed hard, it would take the financial system down with it. That's exactly why governments keep rolling out first home buyer schemes, deposit guarantees, and stamp duty concessions. And why during COVID the banks and government worked together to pause mortgage repayments instead of letting forced sales pile up. Australia's residential property market is now worth around $12.8 trillion, dwarfing Canada's $8.7 trillion and New Zealand's $1.4 trillion. When something is that deeply woven into the economy, nobody with power wants to see it fall apart. And finally, supply. Australia needed around 250,000 new homes built last year just to keep up with demand. We got about 197,000. That's a shortfall of over 40,000 homes in a single year. Vacancy rates are sitting near 1.3% nationally, and rents keep climbing because of it. Canada and New Zealand are dealing with the opposite problem, rising unsold inventory in markets that are actually catching up on supply. So when you put all of this together, stable jobs, a banking system that stress tests every loan, a government that will not allow a housing crash to happen, and a chronic supply shortage, you get a market that keeps grinding higher instead of following Canada and New Zealand over the edge. So here's my question for you. After seeing all of this side by side, do you think Australian property is heading for a crash in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you think it just keeps climbing? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this video helped you understand what's really going on, hit like and subscribe, because I break down the economy, government policy and property every single day so you can stay ahead of what's coming and protect the people you care about. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.